It has been suggested that salt rising bread is more American than apple pie. With a documented history going into the 1700s, it is believed that this bread is unique to the early American pioneers. I must warn you though, it's not a bread for the faint-hearted. While you don't need yeast, and while I made this bread in under 14 hours from start to finish, it can be temperamental for reasons unknown, though salt rising bread legends will try to blame it on anything from unruly children through to an impending storm. Perhaps the single most important factor affecting the outcome is the environment. The starter has to be kept at a very consistent, very warm temperature. The bacteria responsible for this fermentation will get grumpy if you don't give them the heat that they want, and will outright refuse to work. Cue the Instant Pot and its yogurt setting. In my opinion, the biggest unique aspect of this bread is the smell. There is nothing like it. It smells sharp and cheesy despite having no trace of dairy whatsoever. Some people think that the cheesier the smell the better, whereas others say that it comes too close to sweaty shoes. For copyright reasons, I am not sharing any information directly from the book, but you will find references to information provided in YouTube videos by the authors. Let's make the starter. You will need 2 medium potatoes sliced, 3 teaspoons of cornmeal, 1 teaspoon of flour, 1/8 of a teaspoon of baking soda, and boiling water to cover the potato slices. Some people like and recommend peeling the potatoes, but I've just been scrubbing them. These are the potatoes after I wash them. You'll see that some of them have some discoloration on them, but they're not bruises, they're not damaged spots. Some of them do, however, have sections that will need to be cut off, and that includes anything that's green. Once I had cut off the problematic areas, I reached for my vintage Salad Master cutter and using the crinkle slicer proceeded to cut these potatoes into slices. I started this at 8:15 in the evening. Based on my previous experience, I figured that it would take between 10 and 14 hours for the starter to culture fully, and that would put me at approximately 6 o'clock in the morning, which was a good time for me to check on the starters. Previously, I had used a larger half-gallon jar, but in order to make it fit into my Instant Pot, I decided to split it between 2 smaller jars. So here you have the potatoes with the flour and baking soda and stuff on top already. I will use this trivet to put the jars on. I'll then put boiling water into the jars and around the outside of them within the container of the Instant Pot, and then activate the yogurt setting to keep it warm overnight.
Good morning. It's about 6:20 and I've just come downstairs. I'm walking into the kitchen and I can already smell the funk that is unique to making salt rising bread starter. So I'm thinking this worked. Let's turn on some lights and have a look. Oh yes. Oh yes. There's a huge amount of foam over this one. And not quite so much on this one, but still a goodly amount. So just giving it a little shake to wakey.
The liquid was then strained from both jars of potatoes, and a cup of very warm water was added to the mix. Now I poured this water through the potatoes in the other containers to try to salvage as much of the active bacteria as possible. The next stage was to add enough flour to turn this liquid into a pancake batter-like consistency. The next stage required waiting for the sponge to double in size, so I used a rubber band to mark the existing height of the starter and then put it back into the pot with the same water on the same setting to rise. Because a previous experience had showed me just how quickly this sponge could double, I went ahead and mixed half of the estimated flour plus all of the estimated water to make the number of loaves of bread that I wanted. I figured that it wouldn't hurt anything to get a jump on this part of the process. And it was a good thing that I did that, because when I checked the starter at 10 minutes, I realized that it was rising faster than even I had anticipated. At 30 minutes, the sponge had more or less reached the top of the container. I mixed the sponge into the half flour and all water mixture that I had already prepared, and then I added the rest of the flour bit by bit into this dough until I was at a point that I could shape it into a loaf. When I weighed my dough, it came out at 2.8 kilograms, and that is enough to go into 4 pans, because each of these loaf pans that I'm using take approximately 700 grams of dough. I split my dough roughly into 4 sections. I didn't weigh it precisely, and then shaped each into a rough loaf and put it in the pan. Instructions say you can use an egg wash. I decided to keep this vegan and used olive oil to brush the tops of the loaves. I set my oven to warm, as I was going to use this for proofing the loaves, and you'll notice the container with lava rock in the bottom. Because I do bake a lot of bread, I use this as a means of humidifying my oven. By pouring warm water into the rocks, it allows a regular amount of moisture to prevent the loaves from drying out while they're rising. I checked the oven approximately an hour after putting the loaves in, and they had risen more than I would have liked, but that was okay because I know how resilient this starter is. So I pulled the loaves out and started preheating the oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. You will see here that because the tops of the loaves had spread out somewhat, I did pull them into the center a bit from the edge very carefully. I checked the loaves approximately 30 minutes after putting them in the oven. The color was good and the internal temperature measured at 205 degrees Fahrenheit, which meant that they were done. So now for the money shots. I hope you found this overview informative, and that if you have an Instant Pot, you'll give this bread a go. Be sure to view the videos I've linked below for more information on making this very unique bread, and please stick around for videos from me on a number of vintage and historically inspired topics that are all very much a part of my day-to-day life.